introduce themselves, tell us about your organization and what you do.
I'll start since my name was first up there on that list. So my name is Christina Bell, class of '07 at Alverno. I'm very happy to be here among this esteemed group of women. And of course, Melissa, you are so brave and so powerful for stepping up to be our moderator today. So Bullhorn is a recruiting software technology company headquartered in Boston. The company is about 20 years old and has experienced tremendous growth over the past 2 decades. One of the original co-founders is still currently CEO, actually. So it's really a homegrown startup type of business that has been very successful in the recruiting technology industry. I've actually been there for 3 days prior to starting at Bullhorn on Monday. I was a D&I, global D&I manager at Johnson Controls here in Milwaukee. So my role as a diversity, equity, and inclusion program manager is to consult and collaborate with key stakeholders across the organization, like learning and development, talent acquisition, our HR business partners to drive D&I programs. So I'm partnering on both strategy and execution across a corporate environment.
And I'm Darcy Brown. I am class of 2000, and I currently work for Servicenow. Like Christina, I'm relatively new, but I started in August of last year. Just a little background on Servicenow. The company has been around about 15 years out of Silicon Valley. And what we do is we help enable digital workflows for employees as well as for enterprises. Everything from helping to with the COVID vaccine distribution. We are having a hand in some school districts and bringing kids back to school. Anything that can be workflowed, we basically make the world of work better for people. In my role as Senior Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Recruiting Programs and Partnerships, I drive the global diversity recruiting strategy and pipeline development. So I basically lead a team of skilled professionals that are specifically focused on attracting and identifying top diverse talent. And we build a pipeline of talent in the early, mid-career, and executive level space. So I basically consider myself blessed because I get to help build a legacy of diverse STEM talent.
I can go next. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I am delighted to be with all of you today. Again, my name is Eva Martinez Paules, and I currently work at Milwaukee Area Technical College, MATC, here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And my diversity, equity, and inclusion work has been in the realm of higher education. So I have combined 18 years of combined experience in nonprofit administration and also higher education. So the last 14 years, I worked at Marquette University in various roles. And more recently, I accepted the role of executive for diversity, equity, and inclusion at MATC. And I am so blessed to have been selected for the role, particularly because it does not only work with within students, but also with employees in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a senior level role, reporting directly to the president of MATC, which I love. For those of us, all of us who know DEI work, we know that's a good thing, right? When you report directly to the president, which is outstanding. One of my responsibilities includes developing strategic planning around DEI initiatives and projects for the entire college. And MATC currently has four different locations within Milwaukee and Metro Milwaukee area. And we serve a population of over 30,000 students, both part-time and full-time students as well. I am also overseeing the diversity DEI programming for the college, and pretty much as a senior leader, guiding and coaching and helping change the culture and the much needed work in this area, particularly with everything that has transpired last year and continues this year, unfortunately. So thank you again. That's just a little bit about me. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Greetings, everyone. A special hello to all of my Alverno sisters. My name is Dr. Marquita Taylor. Before I continue, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge everyone that is present, those of you that may be grieving or have experienced unnecessary trauma over the last 6 days, 6 weeks, months, or years. I also just want to acknowledge all of the injustices that continue to plague our communities, locally, our nation, around the world, and everyone who has been directly and indirectly affected by so much. So I do want to acknowledge that. I lead diversity, inclusion, and health equity efforts at Yale University and the Yale School of Public Health. My role is actually the inaugural role in my office. So in the Office of Public Service and Social Justice, I am the very first person to hold a diversity and inclusion role. Office was founded in about 1886, and they've never found it necessary to have this. So I feel it a great honor to be the first, but to also be a woman and a Black woman leading this work. In short, my work extends across the university, but the piece that I probably want to harp on the most is that it extends into the a community as well. So my institution is very focused on and ingrained in the community. And in short, I help to foster a sense of belonging at the university and help to ensure that all the resources of Yale trickle down to Black and Brown students, but also that we aren't keeping all of those resources to ourselves, that we are sending this money out to the a community to support directly Black and Brown people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everyone for introducing themselves. It's really, how do I say this? I very much enjoy being not in a room, because we're not in a room, but being with you guys. I read something earlier that says something like, put me in a room full of women who are inspiring, because I want to learn from them. And that's how I feel right now. It really does take courage to be with people like that, because you have to learn to be humble and just learn. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us your experiences and knowledge. So we're gonna move to our next question, and this is for everybody. What experiences shaped your interest in pursuing a career in the diversity, equity, and inclusion field?
I'll jump in. One of the first experiences that shaped me was when I was looking for roles when I was getting ready to graduate from Alverno. There was very clearly inequities. I was able to, this was before we did Zoom interviews. So on the phone, sounded like the greatest package. But somehow my in-person interviews wouldn't last nearly as long as my phone interviews did. And I am committed because of the road that I had to travel to at every chance I had to just deconstruct barriers for others. Because I feel that there were people who had a harder time doing it for me. And it's the debt that I owe. And I credit a lot of that really being cemented when I matriculated through Alverno.
Yeah, so I can jump in on that too. I think to answer this question, I would have to lean on two separate things. And the first one would be my professional foundation. So my work experience has primarily been in communications and digital marketing. And so when I first got into D&I, it was through supporting a D&I committee as part of an internal communications role. So I was responsible for D&I messaging and creating toolkits and helping to foster conversations around D&I. And what my professional experience brought to the space was an understanding of voice of customer, asking the right questions about what the customer wants. And in my case, the customer is the employee, right? Or what they're lacking in order to know what tools to create to support them. And then the communications part of it, the messaging, the importance of active listening, being able to facilitate, make eye contact, bring in the quieter voices and build relationships. So once I got into D&I and I realized how impactful I could be because of that experience, it really kind of drove me more into it. But then also, of course, there's the personal experience as well. As a Black person and as a woman, I've been on the receiving end of microaggressions. I've had lots of people look me square in my face and say, I don't see color. And if anybody on the line does not understand why that's a problem, we should talk about that. I've worked in corporate America my entire career, where I am very accustomed to being the only woman or the only Black person on a team or in a room or at a business dinner. So I know what exclusion feels like because of my lived experience, and I understand how to adapt appropriately and or how to speak up and call something out with a little bit of care. So when I got the opportunity to support D&I as a small part of my role in communications, the more I studied it, the more it became clear to me how valuable all those pieces of who I am personally and professionally were, because I think that I can offer a level of empathy to the people who look like me and have the same experiences as me, but also because I've spent a fair amount of time around the majority, I understand that a lot of them mean well and are sensitive to being called racist or homophobic, and a lot of them really just want to learn. So in the area of inclusion, you really do have to include everybody, the underrepresented and the majority, to really get there in your organization. And once I got that, I knew that I wanted to stay in this space, and I really, really love it. I'm thankful for the opportunity to work in D&I every day.
I want to say that I didn't choose D&I. I think D&I chose me.
Yeah.
And I think you all understand when I say that, because I started in the Office of Admission at Marquette University, and all of a sudden I began doing the multicultural recruitment, all the diversity work, questioning the protocols and the policies, and one thing led to another. And here I am today. But then also, all of that has also, like many of you, has been informed by my personal experiences and my encounters with a lot of the isms, the racism, the sexism, all of that, particularly coming from a Mexican immigrant family, migrating from Mexico to the United States and living on a border town, and then coming to Milwaukee. All of that truly shaped my decision to stay on this path, and particularly my education at Alverno. I feel like Alverno empowered me and gave me the tools that I needed to be able to contribute and to D&I work. I think it was at Alverno when I began to think about and grapple with, how come I'm the only person in my family that went to college, right? And why is it that Milwaukee is so segregated? And why is it that people of color, like, what's going on here? So I thank Alverno for allowing me and immersing me into all these like group projects and community projects and the amazing group work and self-reflection that we get to do. But I think the last piece for my D&I work is that the whole equity, right? I want to continue contributing my life and my talents towards improving the quality of life, particularly for people of color and other marginalized communities. So yes.
I just love hearing all of you phenomenal women speak. So for me, it was very personal as well. I wasn't able to identify at first that this was where I was supposed to be. So I had an idea, but I couldn't effectively articulate it. At Alverno, I studied business and political science. I chose my major because I knew that it would make me money immediately. So I grew up in a family. I didn't have much. I'm from Milwaukee. If you are familiar with it, I grew up on 4th and Keith, and that's all I knew. So when I originally chose my academic area of study, it was because I'd done research and I knew that I could find a job that would make me a good amount of money so that I could do better for myself and help support my family. When I was in those corporate spaces, I started to identify gaps and I would say, hey, why don't we have this? We should do that. And they would say, okay, do it, start it. Marquita, do it. And it would turn into this very heavy Marquita thing without the backing and resources and the support. And then I found myself being unfulfilled in business and finance. So for me, I ended up here in 2017. I desired to be impactful and to foster sustainable change. I was also very intentional about the fact that for me and for children where I'm from, that I wanted to be that sort of beacon of hope or light, so that there isn't this ceiling that if you want to go to this school or major in this field, or I wanted to be the person that provided hope and just be that light, like you can make it off of 4th Street. You don't have to stay here. Like I wanted to be an example. So all in all, I wanted to help shape lives and to chip away at systems that weren't created to help Black and Brown people prosper. It's important to me that I do work that is providing access, opportunity, and also addresses oppression. And also, I wanted to leave a legacy here. I think a goal of mine is to be a change agent and to educate. Also, I chose this field, or it sort of found me, kind of. And I'm excited about it because I get to do work that'll last long after I've left. And I wasn't leaving a legacy in business and finance, but in this I get to.
That is so beautiful. Thank you guys for for opening your hearts. It's really touching. I myself, as a minority college student, I can really relate to all the stories mentioned, and so it's um, it's really nice. Sometimes I think we feel like we're the only ones struggling, but then you reach out and you're like, no, we can do this. We definitely can. So moving to our next question. What ways have you seen your organization or organizations in general change their approach to DEI work in the past few years?
So obviously, amplification of the discipline, right? After we all saw George Floyd murdered on video the way that he was, it really changed the way that a lot of organizations were handling diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a way a lot of the focuses were in the past. It was a lot of times very easy to check a box by having a lot of focus on white women. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but it was safe, right? It does the gender side of it, but it didn't force organizations to open itself up to the real perils of Black and Brown people, or understanding the depth around gender identity, for example. And so now we're seeing more of a focus on inclusion that goes beyond race and beyond two genders. You have LGBTQ+, you have more talk around disabilities, you have more acknowledgement and respect for cultural and global differences and language differences, and celebrations that people are more open with, like Diwali and Pride Month. I mean, you see so many more, our world is just opening up to allowing people to be true to themselves in ways that we just have not seen in the past. And so I think now we're in a place where we have a responsibility to really keep that going and not let it be something that is in the moment, but all of us here, and not just people who are Black, Brown, and women and underrepresented, right? Everyone has a responsibility to stand up in your organization or wherever you are and make sure that we are making this a sustainable effort to continue driving inclusion in whatever space we exist in going forward.
I'll piggyback off of that. And also to kind of answer one of the questions I see in the chat. One of the changes that I've seen with D&I, piggybacking off of what Christina said, was that there is an acknowledgement that there are systemic cultural issues. Point blank. One of the D&I, one of the biggest beneficiaries has been white women, and it has to be acknowledged. One of the things that I bring up quite a bit in rooms is when you talk about women, Black and Brown women aren't included. When you talk about Black and Brown people, Black and Brown women aren't included. So where do we fit? If you figure out how to help solve and make a difference for us, one thing about us is that we raise everyone with us and we help to solve the problems. The question on top 3 things to focus on in the early stage of the endeavor, focus on the culture. If you don't know what to do, think about bringing in a third party and doing a cultural assessment, because a lot of companies may want to attract diverse culture, but if you're not ready to receive that culture, you are doing a disadvantage for those employees as well as your organization.
And I wanted to add a little bit about culture, because that's such an important topic when it comes to D&I work, because we can have a lot of programming and we can have all the training in the world, but if the culture remains the same, that means the same systems and the same cycles will continue to happen over generations and generations to come. I think that in the last 14 years working in higher ed, I have seen the most change in D&I work in higher ed in the last 2 years. I've been in the woods for 14 years, and over a decade, I was getting really frustrated, as we all probably have been. I had not seen a lot of change, but in the last 2 years, I've seen a lot of change. And I think that we are beginning to talk about that cultural change that needs to happen in every organization, whether that's nonprofit or if it's higher ed or corporate America. Because the reality is that we are all facing the same issues, just different sectors, right? Right now, there's not a real recipe for how to do D&I work. I think we are all trying to figure it out. And I hope that we can figure it out in the next 5 to 10 years. So that way, the next generation could truly reap the benefits of all of our work. And I think our group right now here, I think we can all agree that that's the next step. How do we change the culture? And how do we face the resistance, right? So I just would have to say that culture change and changing the mindsets and the habits and shifting the culture for equity mindedness and through an equity lens and also through a anti-racist perspective. And when I said anti-racist, we really need to look at the experiences of Black and Brown people and students, right? And make sure that we focus on those populations, because every time that we talk about D&I, sometimes there's this habit and we want to deviate and go and talk about other things. And we need to remain focused on the real issues. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Just to jump in on that really quick, I think 2 things that you said, Eva, really stuck out to me is when you talk about culture and really changing the way that people are thinking, you have to give them something to do, right? Like you have to help people to understand that everybody has a responsibility in that. It's not just the D&I team or the HR person or the chief people officer or in that team. Everyone has an active role in what the culture looks like in whatever space you're in, right? It's speaking up when people are being talked over. It's making sure that if you see something, you say something, amplifying the voices of quieter people in the room actively, and making sure that the policies are equitable and you're not seeing people being passed over for promotions, but you're just taking yours and stepping on and, raise your hand and say something, especially when you have a seat at the table. Bring people along and give people an opportunity to present their ideas when you have a higher title than them. I think the other piece, which was really hard for me to admit to as a Black woman, but it's real, is that you have to bring white people along, white males especially. They are a part of the equation. We can't leave them out because that's not true inclusion. And the fact of the matter is that they still hold the majority of executive leadership positions in most of the places where we work, and they still have a lot of influences in a lot of the places that we work. And so they have to have a place in it. They have to be an executive sponsor of something. They have to be an ally. They have to be unafraid to understand their privilege. And we have to help them along in that. I'm not saying it's our responsibility, but we can't separate and just say it's all about the underrepresented. We have a responsibility to uplift the underrepresented because it's not equal the way that it is. But in doing so, we also can't leave a whole group of people out. And I hated that I had to admit that as a part of this work, but it is what it is. And like I said in the beginning, true inclusion is about everybody and not just certain groups of people. And so you have to find a way to bring everybody along for the ride.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. So just to answer the question, a few things that I've seen my organization do is listen and to hold space, but also create space to illuminate voices who have been historically, negatively impacted or excluded from a lot of conversations. And I've also found an increased reliance on tapping talent who have skills and or credentials, but also lived experiences, which I think is something that isn't tapped enough because a lived experience is important. Degrees and all these things are wonderful, but like lived experience is extremely valuable. And that's something that my organization does. Another thing that I've seen my organization do is accept accountability, like accept the fact that, you know, we're our buildings were built by slaves and that our buildings are named after slave owners or people who were for slavery, and like accepting that accountability, although it took a very long time to do so, and also acknowledging the fact that they still have a lot of work to do and that they've fallen short, and that there will be times when they will fall short in the future, but reaffirming a commitment to do better and not just pretending that things are perfect. And I would say lastly, the creation of initiatives, offices, and just opportunities for staff, students, and community members to feel included. So we now have something called an Office of Belonging, which is an extension of our DE&I work. And it's just phenomenal to see. So they're trying.
Okay, Christina and Therese, you work in the corporate world. What impacts does your work have on the success of your organization?
Well, for me, my work helps to impact the continued growth and innovation of talent. You cannot innovate in a space like tech and software without diversity. You can't have diversity of thought. You can't have innovative ideas and concepts, and if everyone is a monolith. We have to find that talent. We have to, and the thing is, the talent is out there. I think that recent events have helped shed light on, while that talent may not reside next to you, one of the things that we learned during this time with COVID is that you can find talent anywhere, even in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I don't live anywhere near Silicon Valley. But that doesn't impede you from doing your job. So taking those barriers off, you're dismantling systems that have been in place and sometimes known, sometimes unknown. You prevent the growth. You prevent your growth. We're a fast growing company. We're not slowing down. And in order to grow and really impact your customers, you have to change. You have to change how you look. You have to change how you think. You just have to continually evolve because your customers are continually evolving. And as we continue to move forward in this world, the customer base is evolving. So your customers are expecting different things. You can't always show up the way that you showed up before. They want to know. Your customers want to know what your commitment is because your customers have made a commitment. And it continues just to kind of trickle down.
That's so true. When I was still at Johnson Controls, we had a lot of partnerships, and particularly Microsoft would always reach out and say, what are your D&I efforts? What does your representation look like? It was a part of their requests for proposals, and they wanted to know that information before they started opening up the discussions for signing agreements with our company. So that is 100% true. You know, as far as impact, the research is out there showing, you know, exactly what you were saying, that companies with more diversity have more innovation, they're more competitive, they have higher ROIs. So the work that we're doing has a direct impact on that, because we are pushing our HR teams and our talent acquisition teams to be, I'm going to say what you said again, the talent is out there, right? Don't be fooled by there's no talent in tech, there's no women in engineering. There are. So, so we're pushing those partners to be a lot more creative and expansive in their recruiting efforts, and not just rely on LinkedIn and not just rely on Indeed, but get out there and get some partnerships with some HBCUs, and get out there and get some partnerships with an MATC, where you have a concentration of minorities in a city like Milwaukee and the greater Milwaukee area. There is talent in these smaller markets. And you're absolutely right that COVID was really something that changed the game for a lot of companies across the country to really think about how important it is or is not to have somebody sitting in your office as a requirement for working for your company. Now we have the entire country, and in some cases, the world, to look for talent in. And so there are no more excuses around we can't find talent that's so-and-so, because the talent is out there. But I also want to speak for a second about the inclusion piece of that. So, you know, making sure that we, back to what Eva said, foster that culture where people feel included and welcomed means you have higher retention rates, and higher retention rates should mean that people are being promoted and developed at a higher rate. And what that ultimately will look like is more women and minorities in leadership positions. And what that does is change the image of what executive presence looks like across all of the places where we work, right? So you see, I mean, think about, my son was born in 2016 when Barack Obama was still president. So he has, I mean, he doesn't remember, but you know what I'm saying? I let him know that was the first Black president. He was the president when you were born. And now people who are growing up are seeing the first vice president they're ever seeing is a Black woman. When you start to change the way that people see the world from the very beginning of their lives, they see more executives who are women, more executives who are Hispanic, more executives who are Indian. Now we're changing the game. And so the long-term impact of our work, I think, is really going to have a lasting impact on the way that the people who come after us see themselves and the possibilities that they can see for themselves and their children. And that's what I see for the long term of what we can really do in this space.
Marquita and Eva, you work in higher education. How does your work impact the entire institution? How can diversity, equity, and inclusion address issues facing higher education?
Yeah, thank you for that. So as I was thinking about this question, my sentiments are echo a lot of the things that Christina said, actually. So like my work definitely has impacts across the institution. And one way is that I personally help to reflect that by holding this a position. I work in a very white space. The percentage of like, I mean, you all know Yale, right? Like I don't have to explain that piece, but just being a presence here, being a young Black woman in a leadership role speaks volumes to the students and the parents who I get to interact with who look like me. Also, my work impacts the institution because I very vocally get to challenge norms. It was important to me that I show up authentically in this space and to push my institution to be a proactive and not just reactive around this work. Um, Also, the schools and the offices across a campus for me know that they have fallen short, and they're able to tap me as a resource to train, participate on committees, and also insert when needed around certain decision making points. Um, Also, something else that I just want to add is that something that I'm able to challenge my institution to do is not look at DEI as just a lens or something that you're doing in addition. Like, this is a way of being. This is something that we need to commit to every single day at all corners of the institution, and it should be ingrained in culture again, as was said previously. So it's just not something you choose just today. It's not a lens. I get to challenge them to live this every single day.
And I wanted to add to what Dr. Taylor is talking about when it comes to changing culture. We need to begin by changing those mindsets and those behaviors that have been ingrained so heavily in the systems of higher ed and corporations and other sectors. So I have the blessing to be able to serve on the president's cabinet. So I work very closely with the decision-making body, and not only on decisions and policy, but also in the coaching process that needs to take place when changing behaviors and changing mindsets. Next week, I will be doing an inclusive leadership presentation to talk about that in particular. How do we begin to change our habits, or daily habits, or leadership habits, or mindsets? How do we begin to evaluate our values, make sure that we are, every single day, we are working on diversity, equity, and inclusion, that it becomes a habit and a value. So we don't have to use that word lens, right? So I get to work at that level, but I also get to work with the students and everyone else. And I see myself as a vessel, as a voice for everyone else, to be honest. And I have the privilege to be able to bring all those voices to the cabinet and bring those voices and make sure that those voices are represented, right? Bring those voices to the table when policies are being made. So that's one big bucket for my work. But I just wanted to just kind of touch base on my own personal journey in D&I. I think that I'm just not influencing my own organization. I think we are all influencing society at so many levels, right? But also I'm influencing my own family as the first person in my family to have ever served in a senior leadership role. What does that mean for my nieces who are coming behind me, for my family members, for other women of color, right? So it's kind of like threefold. Yes, we do it for the organization and the company, we do it for society, but we also do it for our families. So that's all.
So we are moving to our last question as we wrap up this conversation. Give me 1 second. Okay, so instead of doing one last question, we are going to choose a question from the chat. Okay, so if each panelist could answer this question, what is the best way or the biggest priority that white people can assist with at this time? This person is wondering what actions can be taken, not just educating oneself.
I would love to jump in on that, and I'm gonna steer a little bit away from the talk about our places of work for a second, and I'm gonna say, teach your children to grow up in a world where they see outside of themselves and what's in their circle. Buy your children books that have different races in them, and when you're with your family and your uncle and your cousin and your brother and your grandpa and your dad and your nephew is talking in a way that is derogatory to people who are not like you, say something. Racism and homophobicism, probably didn't say that right, and sexism is learned and it's taught. People don't come into the world with that level of hatred in their eyes. Somebody was sitting next to Derek Chauvin at some point and didn't say something to him that put that level of hate in his eyes to make him do what he did to George Floyd. So use your influence and what you know and what you've already done to educate yourself to bring you to this panel today to make you answer that question and be an influence to those around you, because I think that's where the real work is. You asking that question, I would see you as somebody who's already on your journey, right? And so we don't need to be, we're not the ones with the problem, right? So get into those pockets and areas of people where they get comfortable saying the N word when nobody else is around, and speak up and say something. My son is in Spanish immersion school, and so we're all learning Spanish. And one day he said to me, I don't want to say it in Spanish, I want to say it in regular. And I said, no, 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 baby, there is no regular. There are different languages, right? Last week he said to me, so and so scream like a girl. No, no, baby. He screamed like a scared person. He didn't scream like a girl, right? So when you correct these mindsets and behaviors early on and in the moment, it changes the way that people think about things. So use your voices in those environments where they really, really matter, where you have influence, not just when you're around a bunch of other underrepresented people who already get it, right? We don't need it. We get it. Use your voices in those spaces where we're not around and we can't speak up. But you're already an ally and you can speak up and you have an influence, and it might be difficult, but that's what you can do today and every day. And start with the children.
That's so wonderful. And I have to say, my youngest child, he speaks Spanish and English, and he doesn't want to speak Spanish. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I just wanted to say that. What I would say is that step up and take it to the next level. Step it up, because some of us, and I mean, some of us get tired of being the only voice for change. I think that white professionals can definitely step it up and advocate and take it to the next level and implement those changes. So that's all I would say.
I would say for white people, I encourage you to break out of the scarcity mindset. There's enough for everyone. Everyone can win. And the beauty is, if we do it together, it's all the more sweeter. And you make such strides for generations to come that you may not even see.
And I would just add a few points. One of them would be to intentionally make the decision to be an ally, to listen, to also apologize when you've made mistakes or said things that may have unintentionally offended someone. Um, Reflect on your biases, but also realize that a savior isn't needed for these communities and these people. I've found that these communities know the answers. They know what needs to be done. You can show up, but don't show up and try and take over. Um, Show up and listen. Show up and be an ally, and overall, try and be a good person. Like I don't just when you're being a terrible human. Be a good human.
Thank you all so much for sharing your answers to that question. Are there any last comments from the panelists before we wrap up?
I just want to acknowledge someone asked about what do you say when someone says they don't see color. And so since I had glossed over that, I just want to provide what my response would be to that. And to that, I would say to say you don't see color is a flat out lie, right? Because unless you are blind, which is a disability that I 100% respect, then you cannot say that because you see my brown face. And so you do see color. What you mean is, I treat people equally. I don't judge people by their race or their gender, etc. So say that instead, because when you say you don't see color, what you are doing is dismissing someone's experience as the the person that they are. I am Black first and foremost before anything else. When I wake up in the morning, I am Black, right? So when you say you don't see color, I take that as you don't see me, and that's offensive. So change the narrative of what you're saying and dig deep into what you're trying to say, which is probably something else like, I treat people this way, or I try to treat people equally. And so if you really think deep into what your intent is, you can change that sentence to mean something that is a little bit more rich and intentional to the person that you're speaking with.
I just wanted to say that it's gonna take all of us together, right? All of us together to move things forward. And I am so excited about the next 10, 20 years in D&I work. I see tons of emerging leaders coming up, and I see the diversity that is happening in our society. So let's work together to make things happen.
Okay, so the worst part of my job is coming on to tell Alverno women who are doing amazing things that it's the end of the time that we have to share it with you tonight. Thank you all so much. This has been an amazing panel. I'm thrilled that we've been recording so that we have the opportunity to share with our Alverno students and the Alverno community beyond. I get to work with Alverno alums every day, and I know that they're amazing, but I'm also always still blown away when we have panels like this. So thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, Melissa, for being a great, brave student moderator for us tonight. You were absolutely wonderful. I just want to do a quick plug for the rest of Alum Month. Check out our website, alumni.alverno.edu or alverno.edu, and click the alumni button. And you can join us for other programming. We have another program tomorrow and then a couple of programs next week before we close out the month. We also have the Alverno Giving Challenge coming up April 28th and 29th. That's our annual participation challenge. So it's not about how much you can give, but the importance that everyone gives back to support our Alverno students. That's our biggest fundraiser for scholarships every year. So this recording, if anyone would like to share it with anyone else, will be available on the website tomorrow. Until we can see each other again in person, take care, stay safe, and have a great night. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thank you. Nice to meet everyone.
Bye.
Me
Same
too.
here.
I'm gonna look you up on LinkedIn if that's okay.
Yes,
Can we
please.
can we do a quick
Touch. I think we should have like a little powwow at some point.
can we do a
should.
quick picture before
Something.
we hang up, you guys?
Absolutely.
All right.
Let me take my face off here.
Why?
Stay.
Well,
You're
Holly.
Alverno.
You're
Okay, I'll
good.
stay.
Okay. All right. 1,
Okay, there you go.
2, 3. Or one more because I got 2 screens up, so it's like double. All right. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. This time my phone wasn't in it. It was such a pleasure meeting you.